Okay, so we are studying the teachings now of Mottel Zilber, and this is really an introduction to this whole topic, this whole area of Torah that may be broadly called Musar. Last week we spoke about the word Musar, related to the word Yisurim, as pain or troubles. And that one way to inspire, to get a person towards something, is to sort of press them, push them. And as Musar speaks about sort of the obligations of Avodas Hashem and the whole world of service of God. And it really is such a huge and deep world. Service, studying the attributes themselves, and then the service, the avodah, and primarily living it, really living it. And one way is that you can be, as Mottel says, machriach, you can force a person toward that. You can either through Hashem does that, Hashem sort of can push the person through difficulties in life till they wake up. And that's an alarm. Mm-hmm. Or, it can happen through people. It's a position that a parent could take or a teacher could take. I think that was much more relevant in earlier times. Well, where a person sees the truth of something and another doesn't, so you push on them to do that. And we spoke about the idea of alates, that this whole topic is taking the responsibility of Avodas Hashem seriously. And that's known as Kabbalas Ol, which is really the first step in Avodas Hashem is Kabbalas Ol. And it's important to point out that this is a very significant transition because when a person comes into Ruchnius, spirituality, especially from the outside, but this also pertains to someone that's coming from within, or someone that grows up religious. The question always begins centered on yourself. What do I get out of this? And spirituality in general, as it is presented today, really is, what do I gain from it? How does it help me? How has my life improved? How has it changed? How am I happier? That's usually the question that most people are trying to answer when they turn their attention to Hashem, which is a very fine beginning. I mean, that's how any beginning starts. It can only be how it really benefits the person, as Mottel will speak about soon. But there is an important shift that has to happen. You might call it maturity, another term. And that has to do with the shifting toward Kabbalas Ol, accepting accepting responsibility. So we're out here, and the heading here says, Omek hamachayev es ha'ish hamusari. It's the second column. On the page it says tough kuf ayin dal. Tough kuf ayin dal. Ulavayr ba'omek yoser inin hamusar. Let's understand in greater depth this whole idea, whole topic called musar. Sheish musari dailo lachriachas atzmo yado. That the person of musar, it's sufficient to compel themselves through it. So the topic itself is compelling enough to propel the person forward without the need of anything external. Be it something that's forceful or even an incentive. Yesh lahakdim divrei Rambam. To understand the motivation of the person of Musar, it's important for us to introduce the words of the Rambam as he writes in Hilchos Tshuva. B'kovo es inyan avodah l'shma. And the Rambam describes their service of God of the highest order called l'shma. Lishma, for God, just for God. This is the words of the Rambam. Ha'oved me'ahava, the one that serves God out of love. Osek ba'Torah over mitzvos, immerses themselves in learning Torah, in doing mitzvos. V'holech b'nesivos ha'chachma, and they go in the paths of wisdom. Lo mipnei davar ba'olam, not because of anything else in the world. V'lo mipnei yiras hara, not because of the fear of evil. V'lo kedei liyaresh tova, and not because they want to inherit the good. Ella osa emes mipnei shamas, they do the truth because it is the truth. So the Rambam describing this, the highest service, describes a person that is not motivated by anything external. Not of a benefit, not of a negative, but it's a recognition of truth. And they are therefore compelled to do it because this is the emes, is the truth. Tihine, b'mahalach daitem shalahamun am. The normal thinking of the average person, of the general populace. Murgal hamachshava, common thought, shekol davar shem yaseu yarviach al yado. If anything that they do, they will benefit through it. V'im lo yaseu yafsid, and if they don't do it, they will lose. B'davar kazeh kedai lihischashiv imla asoso imla. Something like this, it is worthwhile to think, should I do it or should I not do it? Okay, so will I benefit through this? Or if I don't do it, will I lose through it? Kevin sheyesh, turn the page here. Kevin sheyesh lo tikva mipulaso ve'iskoba. Being that he has some hope through doing it and his involvement in it to gain something. Vim lo yaseo, and if he does not do it, mifached al hefsido. He's fearful of the loss. Aval b'davar she'en lo shem tikva mimenu. But something that does not promise any sort of hope. They will not be able to expand through gain through it, and nor will they lose by not doing it. Doesn't really concern them to be involved in it. So the average thinking of most people is, well, will I gain by doing it, and will I lose by not doing it? And that sort of will dictate if I will be involved in this sort of activity, or I'll just sort of leave it alone, ignore it. So that is generally how we go about making decisions. This type of thought is really very common to most of humanity. Because in order to do something, it has to be nogea. It has to be relevant. And relevant means that I have to gain. Or if I don't, I'm concerned that I'll lose in some way. And then, so we see this type of thinking, right? Obviously, we see this type of thinking in decisions, business decisions, of course, first and foremost, but decisions regarding pleasure, will I gain from this activity? Right? Emotional, will I gain from that sort of relationship or not? But then also spiritually. So that same sort of thinking is then sort of translated into the realm of the spiritual, one's relationship with God. But it's the same pattern of thought is, what do I gain from this? How do I sort of benefit, prosper from it? So economically, it'd be I gain money or I stand to lose money. Right? Pleasure would mean I will gain I will attain some sort of physical enjoyment, or I will lose out. Emotional, well, I'll be satisfied, will make me happy. And spiritually, there's some sort of satisfaction, basically. Some sort of satisfaction that this fills a hole that I sense and will leave me feeling good, feeling right, feeling better. That is the general pattern of thinking, each as is applied to each different area of life. If there's some sort of benefit, a hope for benefit, it pertains to me. If I'm concerned for loss, something, also pertains to me. In order to be motivated to something, we have to utilize external causes. So, as Mottel is calling, that's an external cause. So, in other words, it's not just the stick that someone's going to hit you with, right? Or people maybe have memories of, parents that forced them to sit in shul, or, the Rebbe that hit them, It's not just that, but in the modern times, where that's not usually the external cause, there are other external causes. Some of those external causes are awfully close to ourselves. There are perceived I. That most people don't do something just stam, without any hope for some sort of gain, or some sort of cause that forces them, presses them to do it. And Rav Mottel's calling that some sort of external cause. And now he has a very strong term for this. He says, "Huderach machshava bahamti." That is an animal way of thinking. In other words, that's how animals think. Mm-hmm. Animals think that way. Animals, what's the term of cost benefit analysis?
Yeah.
in a more primitive way. That's how they make their cheshbonos. So they make their calculations. Will they benefit from this activity or not? That is how an animal thinks. That's a very low level type of thought process. And it's very aligned with how with the term we were familiar with the nefesh habahamis. That's the instinctual self. The instinctual self relates to this pattern of thought of, well, do I benefit from it, or will I lose by doing it or by not doing it? As we've explained from the Tanya, the human instinct, the human behemoth, is a more sophisticated behemoth. It's a little more sophisticated animal. So there's more things that are at play. There's not just survival, but there's also feeling, like emotions. It's part of, but it's the same thought pattern as a very basic creature, as a creature-like. And that is sort of the benefit or loss type of thinking. That's how we get animals to do all sorts of things, tricks, and that's how they are motivated by this pattern of thought. So sometimes we may not understand that this is actually what's happening, because, well, now we're in the realm of the spiritual, so it's certainly much greater. But when one analyzes it and one thinks, well, the motivation toward it, it's a very similar sort of motivation that one will find in other areas of life, just applied here. And I want to reemphasize, this is not a negative when it comes to starting. When I mean starting, I don't just mean a person starts on their journey, but even starts their day. To start, to get ourselves to do something that's good, the first thing is to do the good deed and not to have the most pure motivation. Do the deed. Do the deed. Think later. But at some point in the general maturing, a person has to be able to be prepared for a transition into something that's much more meaningful and categorically different. Shonahu haben Adam shenishmaso ha'adina v'hanechbedes po'elas b'kirbo. Different is the human, that their refined soul, the refined and honorable soul, is active with inside. A very beautiful way of saying this. So the neshama is active. It's working. It's alive. It's felt, this life force within the person. Then that sort of person is very different. This person is not in need of any benefit, any hope. That will compel the person to do it. She'im hayosher v'ha'emes mechayvo la'asoso harihu ha'mechayev achi gadol. If yosher means it's right. If what's right and what's truthful obligates the person to do it, that is the greatest compelling force. So it is often you have someone that's unmotivated, means the neshama is not awakened within them. So you have to use all sorts of sticks or carrots or something to get the person to do the activity. So there you move them to the activity because something is out there. And something out there, again, it could be something in there that is could be the good feeling that one will gain from it. But when someone's neshama is awakened and is really active, then the recognition of the truth is the strongest compelling force. This is what the Rambam said before. You do You do what's right, what's truthful, because it's the truth. In other words, the recognition of the truth, which comes from an awakened person, that is the force that's active and that gets the person toward it. Someone who understands there's a creator to the world, and they are a creation. They also understand that there is God, who is the God of Israel. We're his people, Am Yisrael. We are privileged to be called Hashem's children. To us it was said, Anochi Hashem, I am Hashem, your God. And we have been privileged, and Hashem has brought us close as a nation. And the truth is, we have obligations to Hashem. And the truth is, we are obligated to serve him like a Jew must serve. A person then becomes, in a sense, subdued on their own. To fulfill his will. That's the truth. Not because of any hope or reward. Okay, so on the one hand, this is a very high madrega. I mean, the Rambam is calling this avoda lishma, which is the highest type of service. That's true. On the other hand, this is a very elementary transition that has to occur within the person. So I'll just try to explain this dichotomy. When we speak about this on the highest level, this is sort of what is dominant in a person's thinking in general. In other words, this type of thought is really what is active within the person in general to do these types of things. That is indeed a very high level. Because if a person would want to analyze it, they'll see there's many things that are sort of motivate them to do the good deed, including things like spiritual satisfaction, emotional satisfaction, and feeling good about oneself. So when you talk about this in sort of the higher levels, you talk about the purity of service, or what's called taharas halef, purity of heart. That is indeed a very high level. For a person to have most of their service to be motivated by such a thought. But on the other hand, it is an elementary transition, because at least it has to be a basic recognition and acceptance of a person. In other words, if a person thinks that ruchniya, spirituality, is just the feeling of closeness to Hashem, then they're missing out on something very basic. And that is that the ruchnius really is Kabbalas al Malchus Shamayim, accepting Hashem as the King. So although we strive for kirvas elokim, closeness to God, and closeness to God also means the feeling, actually, the feeling that every single person with a neshama can sense a certain feeling of closeness to God. When we are involved in the mitzvah, when we have a proper tefillah davening, when we observe Shabbos in a way that's beautiful, when we do an act of tzedakah and help another person, and we're gifted with what's called kirvas elokim. We have an opening. We feel a closeness to Hashem. It's an hour of meditation, or in a time when a person is speaking to God in seclusion in his bodhidus. And there's a certain psichas alev, an opening of the heart. And we're privileged to kirvas elokim, closeness to God. And yes, this is the sechar of Olam Haba, is this type of feeling. But it's elementary to understand that in Avodas Hashem, it's about Kabbalas al Malchus Shamayim, accepting that Hashem is the master, Hashem is the king, and I'm a servant, and therefore I do. And therefore, irrespective of any feelings that I may benefit, I may gain, I am Makabel al Malchus Shamayim, Hashem's kingdom. So that's what I'm saying. On the one hand, as a dominant motivation, that is a very high level. But as an elementary understanding, that's very necessary for anyone that's coming into service of God to be able to recognize that Hashem is the master and I'm a servant. And a servant accepts the mastership of the master and therefore does. And that's why the Shema is the very first thing we learn. And the first thing we start our day with. Because we have to impress upon ourselves that idea of Kabbalas al Malchus Shamayim, accepting Hashem as the master. And when that happens, a very significant transition happens in a person in the spiritual life. Because then they transition from just looking to gain and to benefit and what's in it for me to saying, Hashem, you're the king, you're the master. And therefore I'm ready to do. So that's not, and so the person's still, a lot of what's motivating it is a satisfaction. And that's fine, each person according to their level. But that is elementary. And that is a very significant transition. Because that means, for example, a person will do the right thing even when they don't feel right. And that is the beginning of Avodas Hashem. You do the right thing even when you don't feel right. You come and you get up and you go to davening, for no other reason other than that this is what a Jew has to do. I'm a servant to the master. Servant to the master, accept the mastership. As Tanya says, later on, Tanya says, one must remember, keep in mind always, says, that the ikar, the essence, and the shoresh, the root of Avodas Hashem is Kabbalas al Malchus Shamayim, accepting Hashem as king. That's really the root of it. So the starting place always is, what do I gain from it? What do I benefit from it? But the significant transition and maturity happens when you're Makabel al Malchus Shamayim, you accept Hashem as the master. And that's what the Shema is. And that's really the beginning of Muslim, saying, I don't need anything to tell me, to compel me to do it. Not any external fears, which was a more dominant force in earlier times. Today, it's much more what do I gain from it? And that's how people sell spirituality of all types today. What do I gain from it? How will my life be improved through it? The most significant transition happens when a person stops thinking in that way only. Says, no, what do I need to do for Hashem? Kabbalas al Malchus Shamayim. Of course, that's the most difficult transition because no one wants to let go of that. The thing that we most want to hold on to is that sense of complete independence, and the self-centeredness of being benefited by something else. V'neshama shehi bria kedusha v'adina, but the neshama that is a holy and refined creation, bria malchusis, it's a noble creation, nichbada v'yikara, honorable and precious. Eino tzarech l'sfas hayisurim, does not need the language of yisurim, of pain. And doesn't need the language of benefits either. To translate Yisurim into the modern terminology that we're doing over here, it's the same thing. Yisurim, the pain, the difficulties, the stick, the modern translation of that is all the benefits. It's the same thing. It's the same language, same ideas, and it's a slightly different language. But primarily in earlier times, the world was conditioned in such a way, books are svarim written in that way, of punishment, fear of punishment. That's how parents parented, that's how teachers taught, that was a dominant force in the world. Kings ruled, and that was really what was going on. Today it's been replaced by the benefits that I gain. But it's the same idea. This is a slightly different language. There's some external cause that will compel me to do what I should do. That's not a language of the neshama. That's like a completely foreign language to the neshama. It doesn't like thinking that way. Shusvas behemti, again, that's an animal talk. That's animal language. The neshama doesn't even recognize this type of thing. Immediately when the soul sees the truth, that the man must do for the Creator. It doesn't do it, he corrupts the truth. You feel like compelled. I must. The honorable person is nothing more than that. Even if you don't cause any punishment, I will have corrupted the truth. So to be able to recognize the truth, to face it, not to do it, that's the greatest concern for a person with that level of recognition. That's what it means to do the truth, because it's true. So what Mottel is awakening us to this idea between the behema and the neshama. So we are very conditioned to think in that behema, that animal type of a way. But once the neshama is awakened, the neshama doesn't respond like that, doesn't think like that, doesn't speak like that. It's very different. And that level of recognition of truth, then everything else just sort of falls. So even if this is not always, and it's not the case, we are motivated by many things, and that's fine, each according to Madrega, but there is a certain recognition that we have where that transition needs to take effect. V'ish musari bi'uro, a man of musar, means shemiskarev l'madrega sha'osa ha'emes bavur shu'emes, means that they are close to this level, that they do the truth because it's true. So a person of musar, a person is learning these teachings, and they're given over to it, means that you are now in that realm. That's the world that you're now in. If they don't need any punishments or benefits. Shekasher mizbonein umase, when they contemplate and perceive. Shemechuyav la'asos ezadavar, that they must do something. Machmas yashruso va'amitaso, because it's proper. This is the emes. Hisbonus kazo, the contemplation like that, kvar mechayiv oso b'tviya mechayeves, obligates them in a very strong tviya. Tviya is like something being asked of you, demanded of you. They need nothing else to obligate. Anyone that does this, they are precious in the eyes of God. They consider this person above. In Shemayim, this person is, they consider it to be chashuv. Because this person is being machshav, is taking themselves seriously. They're looking at the neshama and they're taking it very seriously. How a person conducts themselves below is how they treat him above. So a person that begins to look at his neshama and then they start taking this seriously, then Shemayim, they take that person seriously. Shemayim, in heaven, God looks at this person in a different way. This person is motivated by the right things. If you conduct yourself like a precious person below, you're precious in the eyes of Hashem. So, as an ish of the neshama, you said that this is the language of the neshama. The yesh lehes orah. It's important to point out. The general world has descended to a very low state. It's functioning in a very, very low state. We are in need of so many types of yisurim to inspire us to avodas Hashem. Again, yisurim of both types, yisurim. And today, more properly translated as benefits. But with all these things, still you have not, it's not helped. So difficult for a person to inspire themselves through it. Halahu matzav yarmod. Indeed, it is a very, very low state. So the general thinking of the world in all different areas is toward this, the cost-benefit analysis. Mimela, therefore, tzrichen lis orah. We have to arouse ourselves. We have to awaken ourselves. Uvazeh ha'olam hayarud, in this general low state that surrounds us, la'avod la'alos l'madregos gavon, to work and to ascend to a higher state. So we have to have a willingness to say, hey, I don't need to function in the world the way the world is generally functioning. I can obligate myself, I can raise myself above that. And therefore to serve Hashem because it's the truth. And through that, a person will bypass, go beyond the whole idea of Yisur, of external forces. Anyone that raised themselves in this generation and with the general state of the world, Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, is sanctifying Hashem's name. This is Kiddush Hashem. Through that, a person can influence people around him and their family. So this elevated state that Mottel is encouraging us to raise ourselves to has a very strong effect of influencing others. Umisham, from that place, Yachol is spashit, hashpa'aso b'harchava yoser. Person can increase their influence in much greater. They can really cause a complete turnover, a real change. There's a great people. Godless, a great person, has this ability to really cause others to really just change, to change their whole lifestyle, ways of thinking, through nothing more than simply changing themselves and elevating their state. U'kamaymer Chazal say, Yachid sheshav mochlin lo l'cholam kulo. Chazal say that what an individual who does tshuva, he returns to Hashem. Mochlin lo, he's forgiven for whatever the Aveira is, and the entire world. That is a statement of Chazal. So Mottel now is going to explain that. V'habir, explanations like this. Shem Yachid Os Tshuva. If one person does tshuva, they return to Hashem, elevate their whole state, their whole way of thinking, their whole life. Nisoder Tikva. It inspires the hope. Shahashpas Tshuvaso, that the influence of their tshuva, Yispashet L'cholom Kulo, will then extend to the entire world. Hein beruchnius, hein begashmius, in the spiritual and the physical. So Mottel says, what does it mean that an individual that does tshuva, they're forgiven and the whole world's forgiven? It means that when you elevate your state, just yourself, it carries the power that others will be affected by that. And without persuasion, without even direct teaching, but just as the example of the individual who raised themselves, an elevated person has the power to affect people in a very, very deep way. The idea is that through that, misoder tikva, the hope is aroused. Perhaps the whole world will be forgiven. Maybe every single person can be awakened from that. Instead of the world being culpable and therefore punished because of activity, it'll hold that back. Because the hope has been aroused, that perhaps people will do tshuva and therefore will be exempt from punishment. Every individual must say, that the world is created for me. In other words, I can be the individual. Through me, Yigrom, it'll cause the whole world to be forgiven. I'll be that person that can really just affect others. And we've seen this. We've seen this in the world in general. Individuals that just by the mere power of their personality, their being, their elevated living, is caused just a very great change in the world. You can see this in general, people in the world, individuals, they're not Jewish, and certainly tzaddikim, that just by the personality, the presence of people like that has caused people to do tshuva. Some of the most inspirational and influential, really, people have not been the people in power, but the people of this type of power. And the big names that people refer to when they think about influential, righteous people in the world. And in tzaddikim have not been positions, people have held positions of power necessarily. People have exhibited this elevated state of living. And so their choice of elevating themselves above the general nature of the world, that they're going to operate in a higher way. They're going to function in a different sort of way. It's not the cost-benefit analysis, but they are motivated by this recognition of truth that just compels them to greater and greater levels of service and greater determination to do, have transformed them personally and then has transformed others. And we see this. You see this. It's living demonstrations of this. Person has to be giving and generous with a ready and giving heart. To begin to serve Hashem with a complete seriousness. Every single service they do. Whether it pertains to their service between they and God, barachos, tefilos, Torah, the whole world of avodas Hashem, as it pertains to your relationship with Hashem, how to say a bracha, how to daven, learning Torah. This also pertains to the relationship between man and others, man and man. Imhorav, with parents, chaverim, children, b'nei bayis, with one's family. This transition to be ready, as he says, to be ready with a giving heart, to serve Hashem with this level of seriousness in all the areas of avodas Hashem. Both areas, in the areas of the personal service in your relationship to Hashem and then relationship to others. And this type of beginning really begins with what we're calling Kabbalas Ol, Malchus Shamayim, accepting Hashem's kingship, which we do like when we say the Shema. When we say the Shema, it's that readiness to completely give ourselves to Hashem. That's why in the Shema, the intention of the Shema is even to give one's life away. And so one's supposed to think about, that's the extent, that's describing the extent of readiness to give. That's the extent of it. But then it certainly implies even things before that. And beginning with this, the readiness to transition from that mode of self-centeredness, of just what I gain from it, of the readiness to serve Hashem, because this is the right thing. This is the truthful thing. And that's really a beginning in true avodas Hashem. And where probably the most significant transition occurs is in that place. So all this is serves therefore as an introduction and a beginning of avodas Hashem. And once a person is awakened, then it's different language, as Mottel says, different language. This is the language of the soul. So we should be zocha to awaken ourselves this week, and a greater awakening of the neshama. We have a much clearer recognition of the truth, of the emes, than this previous week, and continually raise ourselves and our state, and thereby our families, our friends around us, and others to a greater madrega, a greater level of avodas Hashem. Okay.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.